G'day, and welcome to Market Sam After Work. Today I want to do a video on a peculiar piece but very relevant piece of ELR shooting, and that is light. We are in ELR shooting, specifically we are shooting out there in the big blue shed, and that means that our light is the sun. And unlike, I suppose it's one of the complicated pieces that goes into the competition side of things, which you have to shoot when you have to shoot. And it will be relevant later in this conversation. But best way to do ELR shooting is choose the time of day that suits you. And that for us largely is with the light behind us at a low level in the morning when the air is the clearest, when the mirage is the lowest, and when the light is working best for us. But that's not always the way, so stick with the video and I'm going to explain a little bit more, but we'll go through the basics of what we do to start off with. We use a white target. Some people have said that it should be different colours and things like that, but no, white is the best choice. And like I said, we shoot at the beginning of the day. And that means where the sun is behind us, so we're actually getting almost a glowing effect from that white target back to us. Makes it very, very visible. And I suppose what I'd say is the bit that a lot of people wouldn't understand, but that white target, you can honestly pick it up with the naked eye at 3 miles, that 24-inch plate. And that's because the way the white works, it actually almost glows, which sort of increases its size. As you zoom in and you put more power in it, it almost shrinks. It becomes clearer, but it almost shrinks as you start to bring up more light to it. But it does work like a torch. You'll see a bright torch shone at you from a long, long way away, you'll see it, whereas you wouldn't be able to pick up the size. It's actually the glowing effect, and that is because the white is what's doing the reflecting. Any other color would absorb that and you wouldn't get the same effect, so white's the one that does it for us. And I suppose the negative to the white is in the middle of the day when the sun isn't directly reflecting off it, it starts to disappear against lots of things we're shooting at. So there is relevance to different colours if you're shooting different times of day. But for the time of day we choose is about the white. But here's where things change a little. This is ELR, is that the white or the target for ELR is really just the X in the centre of the centre dot of your target. In any other effect, in every other sense. You talk about grouping on a target and you talk about shooting 100 yards, then your center, your inch center dot, the center of that is what your target actually is. So what we actually look at in ELR shooting is much more relevant than the hit on steel, as much as that's the goal and as much as that's wonderful to do, and the more you can do it, the more wonderful it is. Actually really close is more like you're still hitting the bullseye in an ELR shot, extreme long range. So what becomes more relevant than anything you can see on target is the misses, is around target, is where it's actually hitting. And of course in true ELR, getting onto target is the biggest thing. The likes of the one shot only, that sort of stuff isn't really ELR shooting. It'll happen by chance with more luck, good management, but a fair bit of luck as well. It's actually 2 shots or 3 shots before you're on steel is still the very, very best of how it's done in real world conditions. So actually being able to see the misses is the bit that is the most important thing, the impacts in the dirt. And for the majority, the same thing, having the light behind and shining onto it not only brings up the actual dirt, it also brings up the shadow behind the dirt, which becomes part of that impact. And things like having dry dust and things where there's a little bit of it hanging in the air for a little while can attract the eye to it and that sort of stuff, especially at the beginning when you're trying to find out where you missed from a little bit further away and then get closer to target where you can zero in at the time where you're looking. Things like a very experienced spotter also helps. So your ground conditions, your air conditions, your light conditions are all super important. And experience. Someone like Sam, she's immediately counting. She knows roughly how long it's going to take. So she's immediately counting so she knows where to pull that focus in at the time when it should be hitting. Super relevant to get, that's how she does it in the way of getting the brain set to be able to see the things that are impossible to see in that instant. Once again, well, different to most people viewing, looking at the monitor where you're relaxed in good conditions, looking at the best vision we're able to manage to produce, versus it actually being out in the field dealing with the real conditions, and you don't get to replay, you don't get to look at it again, you've got to figure out where it is. So there's a lot going into that. And I say the dirt, dry dirt's the best, dust coming up, dust hanging is the best. a real contrast between the dirt and the background. This all makes sense in the way of being able to see things. And largely, the simple stuff of a larger round puts more dust, so it makes it easier. A smaller or slower round, so less energy out there, has less movement, which makes it harder. So all those things are relevant, and we've sort of shown that in various form over the years. But one of the things that is quite different, which a lot of people don't seem to understand when I hear comments about you shooting into the sun, so that's so much harder. Listen, there is negatives to shooting into the sun. Seeing the target is harder for sure. Seeing the impacts on target is harder for sure. But the thing is, to a large degree, with the right or average conditions we shoot into, having the sun behind it makes the impacts stand out even better because they glow. The sun's going through them and they glow. So the negatives of shooting into the sun suddenly become the positives when you've got low energy out there. So that's something slow moving like the 45-70, or with a little power like the 22 long rifle is probably the classic there. 22 long rifle, and getting to be able to see it at 1,000 yards, sun behind it became a far better way to do it. Being able to see impacts on target, yes, that's going to be very hard to do, and we've done various things to get around that problem. But like I said, with ELR, it's actually getting onto target is more relevant than actually when you've hit the target. And I suppose that also moves into the fact of, I've just spoken about how sometimes we use the sun behind us, and that's the nicest way to see things when you've got the vision and you've got the power and that sort of stuff. That's the nicest way. Best vision for you guys as well of what we can produce. Sun behind works in the way of seeing those really hard to see stuff. So the 4K and 5K stuff, we go to sun behind us because it helps us see those impacts and try and get it onto target in extreme circumstances. The absolute worst time of the day is actually the middle of the day. And that comes back to where the competitions are and that type of thing, the middle of the day. You get when you start to look at the vision and you start to see things, and you already know this if you think about the early morning light and the late evening light is sharper, more colourful, it's brighter, there's more contrast to things. In the middle of the day, that contrast starts to disappear. You start to get a little bit of a whiteout about things. Mirage can be worse, all that sort of stuff as well, but it's actually the light and the filling of light that takes away the shadows and takes away the sharpness and crispness, makes ELR a lot harder. Now for the guys who do competitions, well, that simply moves in the way that's answered, and it's what most competitions are going to, even in their rules, is larger, bigger, more energy out there. That's to be able to see those misses. Now it also depends obviously on the ground you're shooting into and all that side of things, but even some of the really wonderful ground we get to shoot into in the middle of the day, that stuff would disappear because you've just lost your vision. The dust starts to become the same colour as the background, and even though it's still there and it's behaving exactly the same, it just becomes invisible because the tyranny of distance, the 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 yards with an evening of light and all the contrast disappears, it just makes it invisible. So it is something that is like I said, answered in that case with the big rounds, but I suppose we'll come back to the thoughts of the more naive of people that don't understand ELR and will just hit the target and you'll be able to see it, or set up cameras so you can see on the target. That's only about hitting the target, and as I sort of started with, ELR is actually about getting on the target. Yes, it's great to get there, and yes, we strive to get there more and more and more, but the actual job of ELR is getting onto it. Even in those long-range sniper shots, you hear about that sort of stuff. The one-shot stuff is still, even with the absolute best operator, lucky. Simple as that. 2 shots, 3 shots, 5 shots is what it always actually takes. There's other things going on in the equation to get to that place, but that's the nature of it. And yes, that is how it works. But I suppose I'll come back to what the conversation was about, is light. So sometimes actually the sun in your face, and I had a fair few comments on the bucket shot as to you should have the sun behind you. I get what you're saying. Actually our conditions put it in a different place, but actually once that round is slowed down there and trying to see those off target shots, the impacts to get onto target, the light behind it made it a lot more achievable to be able to see them to move on to target, as much as so challenged trying to see the target. It was a small target anyway, and bright white would have made it, with the sun the other way, would have made it easy to see that, not necessarily made it able to see those impacts to get onto target. So just a thing, I suppose a piece of food for thought to help people if you're trying to do it and you just can't see it because you're getting out further, which I do hear quite a bit. A lot of it's to do with your conditions, a lot of it's to do with the experience of spotter and things like that, maybe your equipment and that sort of stuff. But a big key here is where that big light bulb is. It can really help if you put it in the right place. Anyway guys, I hope that makes some sense. Thank you very much for checking in, and we'll catch you next time.